for joining us. My name is David Evenden. I'm the owner and founder of Standard User Cyber and Standard User Institute, and this is my good friend Cliff, who is the president of Standard User Institute. And thank you again for joining us on Conversations with Cliff. Cliff, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing just fine. How about you? How about you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks. You know, over the past couple of weeks, we discussed a bunch of different topics from malware to antivirus to, and even sort of started to step into and dabble on the world of international espionage and paying for instance, paying for botnets. And so from one of our previous conversations, we talked a little bit about paying for something, say, for instance, in Bitcoin. And I think you want to talk a little bit about where does Bitcoin even come from, and how do people mine it?
Yes. So this is all I'm asking for today is just kind of an introduction, basic introduction, maybe to what Bitcoin is or cryptocurrency. But I specifically want to ask a couple questions about cryptocurrency miners.
Miners,
But
right.
I will admit, I mean, I looked it up just now, and today, one Bitcoin is worth 7,700 US dollars.
Right.
And it just blows my mind. I don't even understand how that can be possible.
Right. Yeah.
And then, and what people do, how you spend them. And I did read recently that if you can't afford a full Bitcoin, you can buy just a portion of a Bitcoin. And I have no clue why would anybody want to do that.
Right.
And so one thing I'm interested in is, where does Bitcoin come from? How is it generated? Do you know anything about that?
You know, I know a little bit. I know a little bit, but full disclosure, I'm not a Bitcoin analyst. I'm not a Bitcoin miner. I'm not a cryptocurrency analyst. I'm an offensive security engineer and operator and analyst. And so, I've read up on, I've had conversations about different types of cryptocurrency and how you can purchase them, how you can invest in them, and even how you can mine them if you're wanting to. So, the specifics around that are that there are strings. There are strings in specific forms where you can actually go through and process and identify specific encryption algorithms to uncover a coin, if you will. And I think I remember a long time ago, the way that they were founded was this, a series of people, or even one major investor, went out and hid a bunch of coins on the internet, and you had to go out and mine for them and look for them wherever they were at.
So you don't even have to buy Bitcoin. You can go out and just find it.
That's where they were originally found at. So you could go out and you can mine for a bunch of them, and people were and there was, I think there was a limited number of them. I don't know if anything on that has changed, other than the value. I don't know if more have been introduced to the market or so on and so forth. I don't know a whole lot about it. We would probably want to bring a Bitcoin.
I've been, as I've referred to on 2 or 3 other times in the past, I've been reading Cybersecurity for Dummies by Joseph Steinberg. And so I am referring to him today, or my questions are arising from things that I've read here. And so cryptocurrency miners, I mean, the mining has proliferated at times when the price of this cryptocurrency has been really high.
Right.
And so even now it's pretty high.
Right.
So
I know that at its peak in 2017, end of 2017, beginning of 2018, right before the crash, it was at $15,000 a Bitcoin. And I know that that in 2012, so that was 17, 18, 2012. If I remember correctly, even a little bit earlier than that. I think probably 2010 they were probably $30 a Bitcoin. Going into 2012 and 2013, they got up to $300 a Bitcoin. And then I think in that time period, they were around $300 a Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
300.
And I think that Bitcoin, if I think I'm right about this, that it was only invented in about 2009.
Right. It definitely is not very old. Yeah.
It's not very old. So
That's exactly right. Yeah.
just barely over 10 years old.
Right.
And so those 2011 and 12, that was the early days.
Right.
And so now that it's worth a lot of money, I mean, with it, when its first big spike, people developed these cryptocurrency miners, malware, if you will, that they put on other people's computers to help them with the math processing or whatever.
Right. Very, very similar to a botnet, if you will.
Yes.
But instead of targeting a machine, you basically had a distributed supercomputer
Yes.
with a bunch of other machines performing processing power. And if you go to a specific website, different websites can use your memory address space to perform the same action. So if you ever go to a website and it starts to, your computer starts to spin or work really hard, means something's happening. So you probably have some type of calculations being performed within that web browser.
So here's a sentence from Joseph Steinberg. He says, not surprisingly, as cryptocurrency prices began to rise again in 2019, new strains of crypto miners began to appear as well, some of which specifically target Android smartphones. And as you know, I've used Android for years. Mm-hmm. So that sort of caught my attention. And my Android smartphone has been very sluggish lately.
Yeah. It is true that it could be something similar to that. You could have downloaded an application. I know that every single week, the Play stores for different Android and iPhone apps, they come back and say, we've removed 10,000 applications because they were doing something malicious, or they had some type of malware, or identified some malicious type of processing. So, it's always possible. It's always possible that something is being performed against your will or without your knowledge, and that's a pretty interesting perspective. The from a cost perspective, though, it's significantly more beneficial for a company to develop an agnostic mining platform that doesn't necessarily care about what operating system it's working on. Mm-hmm. So if you're running in JavaScript or something within a web browser, and any web browser, you can go to that and you can run that JavaScript to perform a specific action, then that will run on any platform at all. You don't need to install an application. You don't need to do anything like that. You can use that. Of course, EXEs, and rather I should say, Windows operating systems, iPhone operating systems, Mac operating systems, Android operating systems. There's a lot more of those, and they're easier to target. So yeah, there definitely could be process there. So when you're talking about, sorry to interrupt, but when you're talking about the specific ways, because you implied, and you basically said performing math functions and math calculations, we're sort of jumping ahead there in talking about what's being performed, and not necessarily like how. So the way that the calculations are performed is by identifying specific portions and then calculating with the algorithm to see if a Bitcoin is hidden within a specific series of characters, and it could be anywhere. They could be anywhere on the internet, and they're processed with huge machines that I think sometimes can cost upwards of $20,000 to $30,000 or $50,000 to build. Of course, you can spend a lot more money building them, and you can even download and install one locally. That may not be very expensive, but you're not going to get very good results on the locally installed ones.
This sounds like a game.
I think that gamification of Bitcoin mining definitely came about in 2014 2015, where it just became kind of a big thing. Everyone started to invest in it, and because they saw that, you know, hey, it's free money. All you have to do is have a Bitcoin miner. When in reality, building a Bitcoin miner is not free. So in my mind, that logic is a little bit funny. But if you know, you find 4 or 5 or 15, or if you happen to have purchased, say for instance, if you invested $5,000 because you thought Bitcoin was the future, and you invested $5,000 in Bitcoin in 2012 and sold it in 2017, you'd make $2.5 million. You know, so it's a significant increase, because at $300 of Bitcoin at $5,000, you know, you're making a significant amount, and then selling them for $15,000 a piece. But you just really don't know, there's no way to know whether or not. But if you have the extra funds and you're willing to invest $5,000 in something that you think might turn out to be something, you know, a 5-year turnaround from $5,000 to $2.5 million is a pretty good investment. You would just have to know when to sell.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, it seems to me, it seems like it's based on nothing
Well,
of value.
Yeah, and
I mean,
that
it's
is
like the way tulips were sold in, I think, the 1600s for many, lots of money.
well. So that's actually a little bit different, because a tulip is a tangible item that you can see and touch. You know, a Bitcoin is not. It's just,
Well, that's true, but it's still a flower. It's
right.
different. I mean, and people in the what was it, the 80s, that were stocking up on Beanie Babies and thinking those were going to finance their kids' college education. I don't know if they really believe that or not, but
Right. Yeah.
Supposedly this little thing you buy for $3 or $5 is now worth $75 or $100 or $200. It's just ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. But in that capacity, you're still talking about a tangible object that you can touch and feel. So the value.
Well, that's true. So this even sort of makes even less sense.
Right. Yeah. So the tangible object you can touch and feel has a value to a person. And when you think about, in the perspective of money being tied to or backed by a specific item. So for quite a while, the US dollar was tied to gold. How much gold do we have? How many dollars do we have? All of these can be backed up, and if we needed to distribute gold, we could, based on that value. At some point in the history of the US, that was separated, and the value of money now became, the value of widgets, so to speak. And so it's just sort of not necessarily, is based on an economy, not necessarily tied to a product in the United States. So and let's just push it backwards. When that value of money was tied to gold, where was gold found? It was mined. And so if you look at it, the same idea, something that's mined, that literally people are just putting into a specific value, and now tying that value to an object, dollar, and then using that as a bartering system to trade. The same thing happens with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has a value because other people believe in its value, the same way people believe in the value of the dollar today, even though it's not necessarily tied to the value of gold. So there's online platforms, and one of the ways that make it so valuable, why is it so valuable, is that it's formally, and I don't necessarily think it's true today, but it's formally an anonymous method to buy and sell things online that can't be tracked back to you or traced back to you. So you can purchase something and then receive that object, whether or not it's sent to you in some capacity of something that you don't own or in somebody else's name, and you go and pick that item up, and there's no link back to you from the perspective of that financial dollar. So that's one of the major incentives of seeing and buying Bitcoin. There are all kinds of types of things. I mean, there's like Bitcoin ATMs even I've seen internationally. And so there's
Hmm.
websites you can go, and there's even a lot of stores that started to utilize Bitcoin as a method to purchase in your store. You can actually use Bitcoin to buy that. So it is not a regulated entity at this point, though. My understanding, it's still not regulated. Although the SEC, I do believe, has plans to try to regulate it in specific
So
formal.
if I own one Bitcoin, could I sell it and get dollar bills for it?
Yes, yeah,
Okay, so that's turning it into something tangible, and I guess in my mind, the dollar bill is tangible, whether
right,
or not it's backed up by gold anymore or not. I mean, it still feels valuable to me.
right, and that literally is the direct relationship to the value of Bitcoin.
Uh,
How much is someone willing to believe in it?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, there's a whole lot of consensus for the dollar bills,
sure,
and
yeah,
maybe a while before there's that kind of consensus for the Bitcoin.
right,
Maybe. I
yeah,
don't know. But things change rapidly. Who knows what 10 years from now, who knows what things will be like.
right, yeah, exactly right. So,
Well, let me, we might just kind of wrap up with just this one topic today, but I do want to bring up my Android smartphone again as kind of an aside.
sure,
But did I interrupt you? Were you about to say
no,
something?
no, no, not at all.
Well, just as an aside, as I mentioned the sluggishness, and I don't know if the antivirus software I have on here would catch cryptocurrency miners or not. I hope it would. But can you take your smartphone just to a computer place, the same place I take my computer to, and they can run some systems on it and clean it all up?
Yeah, so in the previous conversations we've talked about that. There's the only way that they would be able to do that, two major ways. One is if they have a baseline of what your phone's supposed to look like and removing things that aren't supposed to be there. Or two, they have a specific antivirus that's different than the one that you have, that has the previously known or heuristic based signatures to find that type of malicious activity. So the best answer for that is, do you have intellectual property on there that you want to keep, pictures, files, phone numbers, so on and so forth? Are those intellectual properties backed up? And then format your phone and then bring those back. That's really the only way you can ensure that you're getting rid of anything like that. Unless, of course, again, what we've talked about in the past, somebody's installed something as a rootkit layer that then reinitiates itself on format and reinstall. But that's a little bit more advanced, and at that point, you just kind of need to get rid of that physical.
Right. And so I think I basically understood everything you said, but it's technical enough that I have a feeling we may come back to that same topic again and again.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
those are things that people need to know.
Right.
About keeping themselves safe for the long term. Well, I think that could kind of wrap up for today. Just this basically one topic for today: cryptocurrency or Bitcoin.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Cliff, thanks so much for spending time with me, and glad to have this conversation. And we'll see you next time on Conversations with Cliff.